You're Andrew. You're a professor and researcher at Greenwich University, right?
That's right, yeah.
And what we will talk about today is the journey to virtual production and how we work together between Mo-Sys and Greenwich University.
Exactly, yeah. So it's been a really exciting journey, and I'm really pleased to be able to share some of the work that my colleagues have been doing and some of the new and exciting ongoing research that we're looking forward to taking part with in the future.
Great. And so I thought what would be good is that because there has been this relationship and the way it was built, I think it's quite interesting because it's not just like, oh yeah, we want the studio and that's it. It was more like discussion and projects to projects and until building a curriculum together, I think.
Definitely. No, it's a long-term relationship. We're very lucky that we're neighbors, that
Yeah,
we
exactly.
live near to each other. But yeah, the process, I think, is kind of a unique, I suppose, in every context.
Yeah.
And it's important to build an understanding of the technology before you set about designing and building your studio. So yeah, we were very pleased to come, and we've had some colleagues who've taken part in the training and the academy
Yes, that's right.
program, and that was really beneficial for them to learn about the foundations of the technology. And so we were, 2 years ago, we were very lucky that we got some support from the Arts and Humanities Research Council,
Yes.
who's part of the UKRI, who are
Yes.
the main funder for research in the UK. And they've made a big push towards supporting creative technology and creative arts research. And so there have been lots of investments across the country. And ours was part of a creative research capabilities scheme, which allowed us to invest in new labs and new facilities. And as soon as we heard about this opportunity, we knew that we wanted to install a virtual production studio to really make the most, really, I suppose, of the space that we have.
And it's interesting that just to come back on something you said before, it's kind of step by step, but which is interesting is that it's the same kind of scenario with studios as well. Like because you said it's important to test the technology because it's a really hands-on technology, right? It's not like you can just look at YouTube tutorials, which are also great to build some assets, right? But to really test like how it's gonna behave in real time with the camera, with the tracking, with the software, you have to really experience it hands-on, right? First.
Definitely, it's a kind of, in a way, I suppose it's a kind of that transition of the kind of physical workflows into the kind of virtual world. In one way, you could say that they're similar processes. It's just you're doing it virtually, but in practical kind of logistical terms, it's a lot of, you have to understand then that you have to build your assets before you go into the, you know, and so that colleagues getting them trained up before we built the studio was a kind of an important part in that.
It
journey.
works well in terms of timing as well, I think, because like you were saying, you were talking about this investment with the programs that help to have an LED on green, but like you said, like being ready before having the studio really makes a difference, I think.
Certainly, yeah, because it helps you to kind of preempt challenges.
So it's like pre-production for movies is really important. Pre-learning is also really important, right?
Yeah, well, and I think also the flexibility of the technology means that you can build it in many different ways, and thinking about how you design the facility that's going to work best for your needs and for your use case, and based on the kind of physical restrictions of the environments that you have as well, it's really important to consider.
I think it would be good if we show some
let's do that.
maybe some images of the studio as well, so for people to get an idea of what it looks like.
So we've got the studio space itself is about 10 meters by 10 meters. It's a square space that's down in the basement of one of our buildings. And before it was just a kind of multifunction film studio we had a green curtain. But now we have the LED wall at one end, which is 6 meters by 3 meters. And on the inverse side, we've got a L-shaped infinity curve green screen, which we've put in as well.
I think you guys also, like, even in the industry, we were saying yesterday, like, it's not like two technology competing with each other, it's more complementing each other. And I think you also really use that, you use both of the technology, especially for the students. I think it's really important for them to understand these different tools.
Absolutely, right? Yeah. I was just talking this morning to Ben Tilbrook about this, about the importance of showing students the process of technology and how things evolve and change over time. because I think it's very easy to kind of land and think that, oh, this thing exists right now, and this is the tool that we must use for the project. But when you understand where that came from and the history, you can then see where it's going into the future, and that allows you to be freed from the kind of immediate restrictions and to think more creatively and more innovatively around it. So yeah, for us, being able to flip between the being able to do the close-ups on the LED wall and then being able to do wider shots on the green screen really does make the flexible space function for all of our needs.
So there is a way to go. We think at Mo-Sys as well. It's what tools you're gonna use for each shot, basically.
Yeah.
I think we might have some other. I mean, I'm sure actually that we have some other shots. I think it's quite interesting. That was our colleague Mache, who's here in Greenwich University, I believe. And it looks complex, but it's a good example, I think, of how we work together as well on the workflow and how to really make it work from a pre-production to the end results on that. So maybe you want to comment a bit on that.
Yeah, so this, I mean, you can see a bit more the green screen as it comes all the way out. So we have to imagine it's behind us, but
So we'll be here.
the flexibility now that we have in this space is really incredible. And once we got established the workflow, once we kind of understood, how it works sequentially, it flows really, really well now. Once the team are kind of really efficient and trained up.
That's
So
nice.
yeah, it's we've got people able to kind of create assets, bring them in, develop projects, and doing all kinds of exciting research projects. So the first image that we just saw, the team, they were doing a research on non-white skin tones. So they're looking at
that's really
Asian
interesting.
skin tones and lighting based on the LED wall, because sometimes the light quality of the light coming back is not suited for all skin tones. And so they've been doing some really exciting research on that, and we're looking forward to kind of continuing that.
Happy to discuss that as well,
future,
because that's also something very important for us. So we experiment with different lights. I was mentioning for example, the ETC lights. They have an 8 LED technology, which is really good for skin tone because you can really play on the spectrum. And happy to discuss that
absolutely.
further.
Yeah.
I think we have some other picture of the university. So that was more used in a production, right? This one, it was more.
This is a comedy film that my colleague Deborah Kleeker has been shooting, and they created this kind of backdrop of Australia and shot a short film, and they were kind of really experimenting with lighting, kind of blending characters into the space.
So interesting. Sorry, go on.
No. I think that they had, for me, it was really, really good to be able to observe that process. I'm kind of feel a bit like an anthropologist examining the colleagues going in and using the space and kind of examining how their processes adapt to the new space. But I think the ability that they had to shoot scenes and to change locations very, very quickly was the real power for this film.
Nice. And I think you just mentioned that it was a comedy.
Yes.
That's really interesting as well, right? Because you have different type of budget depending on different type of movie. Typically, you wouldn't go and shoot in Australia for a comedy, which is a student film, right? So it's quite interesting that it was used.
Absolutely, and it was really integral, the location, to this film. It's based on her parents and their journey.
Nice.
And so actually, it was really, really, you couldn't shoot this in the English countryside. You had to be there, and so it really made it possible to kind of play with location in exciting ways.
I think we have another picture.
Yes.
So what is that? Oh yes, that's maybe you want to tell us more. It's really bright.
Yes.
About the program, maybe a bit, on how it's led to virtual production in the university.
Yeah, so we're really, as I said earlier, we're very pleased to be supported by the Arts and Humanities Research Council and the labs that we built 3 labs, and we call it the Shared Hub for Immersive Future Technologies. And so we've got a sound lab where we've got a 360-degree immersive studio. We've got a theater that we've upgraded with immersive sound and projections. And of course, for us, there was only one way to go with the film studio. It had to be a virtual production film studio. And the idea is that hopefully those suites can all work together. We can be designing immersive audio. We can be creating immersive experiences for performance and shooting content via the virtual production screen.
It's interesting to say for you, it was obvious to have virtual production. I know that there are different university or schools experimenting and wondering, but it feels like anyways it's just now the way of making movies. It's like if you have, I guess, if you have a dolly, you have also an LED wall. It's just tools. Actually, it's not
Yeah.
just. Oh, we have to do everything in studio. We have to, and it's becoming, I think, tools for filming that you use are not depending on the scene or the budget or the story on what if you need or not, right?
Absolutely. And I think that lots of universities are recognizing that into the future. And so I think that's what's been interesting, that there's been this research investment, and now people are taking notice and recognizing, we need to also invest in this. And I think I've heard many other colleagues at many other universities who are thinking about building the studios. And so that's why I'm really pleased to be here to talk about our experiences, to share some of that knowledge to other people, to kind of help them make the choices to design the systems that work best
It's
for
really
them.
great to have you just saying that,
And
actually.
yeah, so one of the important things to say is that the relationship between Mo-Sys and the University of Greenwich was really, really vital to your understanding of what our needs were, and therefore then the delivery of the system that works best for both experimental research, pushing the boundaries, but also now for training the next generation of film professionals who are coming through.
It's really important for us as well, this discussion in general, because of course we are creating products, hardware, software, etc. But we also provide solutions, and for us, what's important is the ecosystem around, and that can only happen with discussion, with what the need are for studios and for schools, and how we kind of bridge the gap. I think we have another picture, actually, that should show. Thank you, Sam. Okay, so that's interesting as well. That's more the how you used Unreal. Maybe the next picture will be how you
So
want to comment that.
this is just very quickly,
Okay.
I'll just say this is
Okay.
an example of the color testing experiment that they were
Okay.
doing, working with Unreal, to kind of, again, blending the real lighting in the space with the actors and the virtual environment that was on the screen. And
That's really interesting as well, like because stuff like, for example, experimenting with lighting, experimenting with the color, or depth with the color of the LED wall, etc., is stuff that sometimes, because we were talking about industry and schools, stuff that things that you don't really have time to experiment on a shoot.
exactly.
So
That's what
yeah.
I think that's one of the key differences. So our job, I guess, in the university environment is to play and experiment and to try things out and to have that flexibility and that fluidity. And that is the luxury that we have, the time to experiment with things, which you don't have when you're on
Exactly.
a deadline to
Yeah.
shoot the film and the talent's there and
Exactly.
you've got to get it done. So I think understanding that function of the labs that you're building is a really important part of the design process, to understand that it is about kind of having that more flexibility and that time to try things out.
Do you feel that there is a I mean, of course, there's a common need, and the goal of the university is, of course, to train a new talent uh, for projects in studios or on movies. But do you feel that in terms of technology, there are some different need for the universities, and there will be for the studio? Maybe I'm thinking more on the research level, like if you need more advanced, maybe not advanced, but much more control and more understanding of what's really in depth with the technology.
I think, well, I would say we want to get on with doing the research and doing the same for teaching as well. So actually, the robustness of the technology is a really important part for us. I think if we think about the Star Tracker, for example, the fact that it works as a kind of inside-out tracking system is so much easier for us to calibrate. I mean, we calibrated it once and it's been running for months now, and so if we had the outside sensors looking in, we would have to recalibrate that every shoot, every session, and that would just eliminate so much of our functional working time that it just wouldn't be practical for us. So there are certain things about the technology that's really, really just, we can hit the ground running in a much more efficient way. And then, yeah, often we're trying to break things. So we want to push things to the edge. And so it's,
Great.
yeah.
And it's great to have this partnership because it's good. Like we sometimes have new ideas, new projects, and it's good to have people experimenting with it. As you say, that's not something you can do on a film shoot. So it's great to have this partnership
Exactly, yeah.
together as well. So I think we have another image coming. Oh, that's interesting. I don't know how many people can see, but that's maybe other use of the space, right? And
Well, this is the exciting thing. So we built it with our film colleagues in mind. They told us they were the ones who really wanted a LED wall. But actually opening it up to other parts of the university and other researchers has been really, really exciting. So our Captivate research group, who are based in architecture, they do a lot of laser LiDAR scanning of buildings. And so this is a scan of the Rose stairwell in the Queen's House, which is in Greenwich, which is the
it's amazing.
first kind of, I think it's a first cantilevered staircase in the United Kingdom.
It looks
And
amazing.
they've been doing these high resolution scans. And so they are taking enormous buildings and normally compressing them right down onto a tiny laptop screen. And so for them, being able to then view these scans of large buildings at scale on the LED wall suddenly creates a totally different relationship for them with the architecture. So they're able to look at tiny details in the scans and see them in enough detail that they would just never be able to do. And so they've talked about how transformative it's been for them.
And I think, like in terms of access, it's you can even access the whole. You really have like restricted access to that, right? So having it then as an asset can really help on the.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I know that they've been talking about how we then kind of use this for via splatting to then
Yeah, that would
create
be amazing,
environments and worlds. And so I think what we mentioned earlier, this idea of looking to the future, I think that collaboration between architects and because there is this convergence of these tools and technologies.
Exactly, and I wanted to mention earlier when we had this image of Unreal, that also for us it's the same goal in studio, like to when they have 3D artists in Unreal. Our goal is to have all the software we develop available within Unreal, because I'm sure that in Greenwich University you have a lot of students who are also like doing, for example, 3D work as 3D artists, or creating some characters, maybe like some 3D characters, and they want to still like focus on that, and maybe not using virtual production. So if they work with other departments, they need to be able to collaborate within different departments, right?
Absolutely. And so that's one of those planning things that's really important to understand and explain to colleagues, that we need to be all on the same workflows in order to integrate. But if you can do that alignment, then there are really exciting opportunities to integrate all sorts of different subjects and
We'll talk a bit about that at the end, I think. But we have other pictures, I think, coming. So that's from a shoot you did recently, right, in the university?
Yes, so this is my colleague Lab Mo, who's the cinematographer and runs our film course. And he was really interested in the opportunities of using the LED screen for kind of dynamic backdrops.
Interesting.
As part of the kind of narrative dramaturgy, this kind of scenography changes during the sequence. And so he created this film, which is called The Gardener. And I think we have a trailer for it as well.
Yes, I think we can.
Plants are dumb. Give a plant some light. It doesn't know it's artificial light. It doesn't know it isn't the sun. But give it enough light, it'll think it's outside. It'll think it's in the field somewhere. And make it warm enough. It might even think it's in Asia, in Vietnam even. And give it enough water. It'll think it's the monsoon season back home. Basically, give it enough water and enough light. It'll believe it's anywhere, other than where it really is. In a room, in a house, in England, somewhere.
I think it's really a great example because it also demonstrates the kind of power that you can have with very kind of minimal, kind of simplistic uses of the space. You know, it's a tracking shot back, but you can see the kind of dynamism that you can get through the shifting of the lighting and the changing of the kind of plate in the backdrop as well, that can really drive. You know, this just wouldn't be possible with the green screen or in the same way. You know,
because there's also like an element of it's quite a close up at the beginning as well. So doing it with green screen will be a bit more complex, especially with the keying and the all the elements that are involved on the foreground that are a bit blurred as well. It's not that easy to do with green, but LED is a great.
Exactly, and this is it's a really exciting example of colleagues experimenting. This is the process of research in practice, trying to kind of really understand what the opportunities are of the new space. And yeah, it doesn't have to all be bells and whistles, superheroes blasting out of the sky. It is actually about integrating the technology into the heart of the storytelling.
Absolutely, and I really like that example because like it shows really like with a fan, with like a table and just a small rig, you can do something that look actually huge and massive as a set. And more we see like LED walls within office space now. So it's not like, and we have the same achievements that if it was in a huge, massive studio. And that I think is really interesting, like to work under space constraint, but get the same result as if you were in a massive studio.
Exactly, and I think that's the reality of the world that we live in. Not everyone can afford to have a giant curved LED wall, and the key thing then is to adapt. That for me, that's the interesting thing about the creativity, that the creative approaches that
And
you
you
can
just
use.
talk about curved LED wall, and before we were talking about like the importance of lighting for skin tones, and more people realize I think that it's better to have other source of light for the skin tone. So it's actually better to have more of a flat wall and to have different light sources to make sure that the skin on the talent is respecting the skin tone and the light you want. So it's even better actually to not have the curved wall, right? In terms of
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that this is where it's so important to kind of really deeply consider what it is that your end goal is when you're working. And so to have that knowledge of having been taking part in the academy training to kind of had interaction with the technology allows you to get to grips with exactly what it is that you are really going to get the most out of, right? Because there's no point in having a fancy big
exactly.
system that
And
don't really.
it's not interesting for anyone to like see a huge massive LED wall, and that's kind of scaring the student. Like, what do we do with it? No, it's great. It looks fantastic, but what's next? I think it's more interesting to be hands-on and try it yourself, and then
Exactly. No one wants a white elephant of this, really expensive equipment that then, is so expensive that you can't operate. And I think that's the great thing, that you helped us design a space that has that flexibility, that being able to flip round and do the green screen for the wider shots and the close-ups. So it really does, it really fits with our use case, which is kind of, I guess, smaller independent film production.
That's a great point. Actually, you mentioned like flipping around because like having the same system and the same setup, but that you can use for different technology very quickly is also essential on set as well.
Well, absolutely. The fact that the Star Tracker is just kind of integrated into the room itself, so we can just rotate the camera around and we don't have to reset anything. That's just there to get going. Is just kind of really invaluable for us in terms of.
And I think it's also really interesting that you guys are really researching and experimenting as much with both technology, LED and green. And it's not just, oh, we're gonna follow whichever hype curve, and now we have to switch to back to volumes and back to that. It's more like, what do we have, and how does it move it further in terms of technology for, like you said, storytelling and better storytelling.
Absolutely. And there is a risk that people go, oh, everyone's got an LED wall, we must have it. And I think that really understanding that sustainability, that process of why you were working on green screen before and how you can still retain the best characteristics of that, and looking at the best characteristics of the LED wall, making the most of it, because it's, I would be worried about lots of other universities investing in these big things that then they couldn't use properly. So thinking smart about the design is really, really important.
Talking about sustainability, you just mentioned, is that something you're researching a lot? Like, how can we improve sustainability of filming, of on-set filming, or studio, and with technology? I think that's something you also try to improve.
Certainly, some of our colleagues have been really. I mean, well, we can go back to the example of the Australia shoot. In terms of not just budget, but also, flying people around the world to engage in projects just isn't really feasible these days. And now we have the possibility to bring the world to us, and that is a really exciting thing. And I was mentioning earlier to you also, we have an incredible cinematographer colleague, Jan Tovey, who's in a wheelchair. And the LED wall has reopened up the opportunities in the world for her to kind of engage in productions. And it's been really exciting to see her interaction and integration with the screen. So it's not just about sustainability kind of for in terms of environmental sense as well. I think it's really, really important to consider it in terms of accessibility and
it's really interesting point actually, because that's really changing the way, like, you, of course it will be more difficult for some people to go to location and to have this, and I think in a sense, like, having the control on the location, you can spend much more time, which is funny because it's not like say the real location, but you still have the location with you, and you can control it more in a sense of creativity. And like you said, like, if there's an issue of accessibility on set, for example, being in studio with the location with you, it really makes a difference, I think, right?
Absolutely, and it allows us, some of our students have budgets to go abroad and some of them don't, but now this is a great leveler where we can offer the same opportunity to all students to engage.
It's not just Hollywood, where you could do movies before. I think the world is really changing for studios. We see that a lot, of course, but also for education and university. Maybe in the past you had like top uni in LA, and today in London, or anywhere in Europe or in the world, we can have the same quality on the same level of research for film, I think, or storytelling in general, globally. And it's really decentralizing, like big hub. It's more like really from everywhere you can have the same quality, as long as you put the effort in storytelling and ambitious research, I think.
Absolutely. And I think for us, it was quality, not quantity, was the big kind of marker of this. London is very compressed in terms of space. We don't have the luxury of a large, big warehouse for studios. And so actually making sure that we could spec out the highest pixel pitch for our screen was really, really important. And so we worked with Ben, kindly helped us to kind of find the kind of optimal screen for us. And so ours is an Alpha Light screen with a 1.5 mil pixel pitch, I think, which means obviously that we can make the most of the kind of limited space that we have.
It's really important and really interesting what you say about the space, actually, and that it used to be you need to have a huge studio, so you kind of have to look in different location, when of course it's more accessible to have more space. It's maybe less expensive, of course, to have that. And now being able to work within environments where you have a much limited space, it's also some people to have studios in place you wouldn't expect now, more and more. And,
definitely. And as you mentioned, I'm really excited about what happens next in the future of these kind of micro studios, the kind of mini LED walls. And think of all these people that are creating so much content on social media, on kind of TikToks and Instagram. I think that is going to be the way, in the same way that everyone's got like a podcast studio. I think in a few years' time, there's going to be so many people that have LED studios. So,
and we're looking forward to that. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, totally.
I think one more picture. That's more, you were saying what's next, and what else is here? Do you want to talk about that? Is more a different project, but that links completely with virtual production as well?
Totally. So as I mentioned, we've got many different colleagues across the university, and when they discover about the new labs, they often are very excited to work. So this is actually colleagues from my research group. So this is Ms. Me in the corner there, and this is Emma Margetson and Brona Martin, and they're working with the icosahedral loudspeaker, which is a spatial audio speaker that projects beams of sound out. So it's not a traditional surround sound, it sits in the middle. But obviously one of the challenges that people have had on set with the LED walls, especially curved ones, is the reflections of the audio, creating kind of strange acoustic focusing. And so that in some instances is seen as a challenge, but Emma and Brona are researching the affordances of it. And so how can this speaker is designed to reflect beams of sound off of surfaces. And so when you have a giant surface, why not make the most of it and think about how you can integrate soundscapes into the virtual environments? How can you set a scene for the talent to kind of recreate that environment? Yes, this is a video, for example, we did a scan of Mars. So this is the Jezero crater from NASA LiDAR data. So we got the LiDAR data from NASA and recreated the topography. And then Brona recreated a Martian soundscape through this to kind of really create this sense of environment. And if we were using this for shooting, we would run the soundscape and then we would cut it a few seconds before rolling for dialogue, so that the actors can be totally immersed in the space. So, yeah,
It's really interesting in a sense that as well, there is not just the video, right? There's audios, and how do you adapt to new ways of filming as well with other part of filmmaking, right? So
exactly. So, because some people could argue that, oh, you can't leave the location. There's so many kind of aspects of it that are, tangible, that you really need, that aren't communicated. But actually, there are ways of bringing that back through. So with kind of surround sound audio, ambisonic recording, you can kind of capture soundscapes of locations as well and bring them into the space. And it allows you to really focus on those features of the set and the location that are really important to you, and
really
to make the most of that, and to reduce, as you mentioned earlier, the pressures on logistics and sometimes access. We have the luxury now, once we have a location, we can come back to it again and again and again. We can try reshooting a scene in multiple different ways that we just wouldn't have if we had to hire our location.
it's just now the only problem is to say to the director, okay, you really have to stop now. You cannot do so many takes at some point. You have to.
That's true. Getting people out of the studio late at night is hard.
Which is a good problem to have,
Yeah.
It's not like... All right, well, thank you so much.
No, my
Andrew, for
pleasure.
coming.
Thank
It was
you.
really, really interesting, and I'm sure many people will be interested in seeing your journey and how you took it step by step to a really successful university with such a great studio. It's really a pleasure for us to work together, and we look forward to more areas to collaborate.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. Thank you.